What if I told you that the most dangerous person in the room isn't the smartest, the strongest, or even the most experienced, but the one who believes without a shadow of doubt that they have already won, even when everything is stacked against them? It's not confidence, it's delusion. And in the world of power, delusion is not just an option, it's divine. This is the kind of belief that builds empires from nothing, that defies logic and failure, and rewrites destiny. It is not grounded in reality. It bends reality. Machiavelli didn't call it delusional, he called it necessary. He knew that when the world doubts you, when all logic and reason point to your demise, only the delusional can reply with, "I'm just getting started." History, in all its brutality, does not reward reason. It rewards the irrational, the obsessed, the ones who, against all odds, continue to believe in their own legend before anyone else does. It's the madmen, the outcasts, the fools until they win, and suddenly, they are great. Machiavelli understood this bitter truth better than anyone. In his seminal work, The Prince, he didn't extol reason or moderation, he celebrated results, often achieved through delusion. You see, what separates a lunatic from a legend is success. History is a graveyard of forgotten realists, those who waited for the perfect moment, who played it safe, and who stayed humble. But it's the conquerors, the ones who marched headfirst into storms with nothing but raw belief in themselves, who have their names etched in time. Consider this: Alexander the Great believed himself to be the literal son of Zeus, not metaphorically, not in a godly chosen sense, but as a divine being. This delusion wasn't a mere boast, it was the foundation of his empire. He wasn't satisfied being just a king, he believed he was a god. And because he believed this, so did his soldiers. They fought like they were commanded by a deity. His enemies trembled at the thought of facing him, not because they saw a mortal king, but because they faced a god. When you believe your bloodline is sacred, retreat becomes blasphemy. Victory is the only acceptable outcome, because losing would undermine your very identity. Napoleon, too, crowned himself emperor not in the name of France, not under divine right, but by his own hands. This wasn't arrogance, it was psychological warfare. It was a message: I don't need divine right to rule. I am the right. Muhammad's story echoes this theme. He stood alone in Mecca, armed with nothing but a message that could have led to his death. But he declared it with unshakable confidence, repeatedly, in the face of overwhelming tribal rage. He didn't succeed because of armies or superior resources. He succeeded because of his belief. And belief, eventually, became empire. These men didn't win because they had the best tools or the largest armies. They won because their belief in themselves was louder than the world's doubts. They refused to see reality the way others did. Machiavelli's insight into the mechanics of power, as presented in The Prince, wasn't just about acquiring power. It was about the manipulation of perception. He understood that rulers don't win by being right, they win by being sure. The delusional leader, the one who believes so fervently in his own myth, exudes an aura of certainty that compels others to follow him even when there's no logical reason to do so. Consider the idea that history does not reward those who wait for perfect conditions. The real prize is given to those who make the world believe that they were meant to win all along. In a world full of rational thinkers and cautious strategists, it's the delusional conqueror who commands the future. When logic and reason say, no, the delusional reply, I'm just getting started. In The Prince, Machiavelli famously writes, a prince must appear resolute even when he isn't. What he means is that certainty itself becomes a weapon. The delusional leader understands that power is never about being right. It's about being so sure of your victory that others have no choice but to align with you. Machiavelli understood that in the game of power, perception is reality. And in a world that craves certainty, the delusional man becomes a beacon of conviction, pulling others into his orbit. Power has often favored the delusional. Napoleon believed that he was destined to conquer the world. Alexander thought of himself as more than a king, he was a god, and his soldiers believed it. History remembers the deluded daw, the ones who marched into battle against impossible odds with nothing but an unwavering belief that they were invincible. But what separates these madmen from legends is success. When delusion is met with triumph, it becomes legend. But what about those who failed? History forgets them. The ones who played it safe, who were content with waiting for the right moment, or who sought validation from others. These are the forgotten men. Instead, history immortalizes those who dared to be reckless, who ignored the doubts of others, and who acted with the intensity of someone who already won. Alexander the Great, Napoleon, Muhammad, they didn't wait for permission. They believed in themselves before anyone else did. And once their success became undeniable, they became legends, their delusions now regarded as the truth. People do not follow reason, they follow conviction. In the game of power, certainty is magnetic. The delusional leader doesn't need evidence or logic to command a following. He simply needs to project an unshakable belief in his own destiny. When someone speaks with absolute conviction, even if they are wrong, most people will fall in line. Why? Because certainty overrides logic. It overrides doubts. It overrides facts. The human mind is hardwired to follow confidence. Even if the deluded leader has no plan, no evidence, no reason, people will follow him simply because he believes, with unshakable intensity, that he is destined for greatness. Consider the most powerful entrepreneurs, the most charismatic leaders, the most feared competitors. They didn't wait for perfect conditions. They didn't ask for validation. They acted with the confidence of someone who already won. And that belief became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Delusional belief creates momentum. It bends reality to your will because, when you act like the world already belongs to you, it eventually does. In the game of power, reality is secondary to perception. History has shown that appearances can shape the world far more effectively than truth ever could. Delusional individuals understand this better than anyone. They don't just aim to be great. They create the image of greatness long before anyone else does. Take a look at Machiavelli's teachings. A prince must appear resolute, confident, and unwavering. If he isn't, this appearance of power, this projection of certainty, is what captures the imagination of those around you. People don't react to the truth. They react to the way the truth is presented. The delusional leader, whether or not they actually have the qualities they project, becomes the reality for those who follow them. When you shape how others perceive you, you shape their reality. Napoleon didn't need to wait for divine rights or an army to take control. He made the world believe he was destined for greatness, and because of that belief, his myth became reality. The delusional individual doesn't just fool others, they fool themselves, too. They become so entrenched in their own myth that they can't help but walk as if the world is already theirs. And eventually, everyone else starts to believe it too. It's one thing to speak with confidence, but it's another to live the delusion every single day. Delusion doesn't work because it's convincing in the moment. It works because the delusional person breathes it, walks it, and makes it part of who they are. The myth they create is not just about the words they say, but about the way they act, the decisions they make, and the way they carry themselves. When Napoleon crowned himself, it wasn't just an act of defiance, it was a psychological declaration. He didn't wait for the legitimacy of others. He made himself the right choice, the only choice, through his actions and his self-belief. This is the essence of delusion in power. You create your own reality by embodying your belief in every moment, in every gesture. The delusional leader's actions must align with the identity they've constructed. It's not enough to talk about being a conqueror. You must train, think, and act like one. You must walk into rooms as if they've already been conquered. You must speak as though your words shape the very world around you. The delusion becomes reality because you've committed to it in every aspect of your life. When you live your delusion, others will follow. People might start out skeptical, but when they see you consistently act in alignment with your myth, they'll be drawn into it. The delusional man doesn't just speak, he embodies his legend. Delusion, in the right hands, is a weapon. It doesn't work by convincing others of your greatness through proof or logic. Instead, it works by projecting such an overwhelming sense of certainty that it overwhelms your enemies before they even know what hit them. When you act with the intensity of someone who has already won, it changes the dynamics of the situation. Your opponents, no matter how rational, will hesitate because they are confronted with someone who appears to be beyond doubt. And that hesitation is the moment of victory. Delusion does not need proof, it only needs belief. History is full of military leaders and conquerors who did not have superior armies or tools, but succeeded because they convinced both themselves and their followers that victory was not only possible, it was inevitable. Alexander the Great didn't just march his armies into battle. He led them as a god, and because of that, his men fought like gods. Napoleon, too, didn't rely on superior forces. His confidence, his absolute belief in himself, became his strongest weapon. When you lead with that kind of conviction, Your enemies are already defeated before they even realize they're fighting against you. The turning point comes when belief in your own myth is so entrenched that it no longer matters whether it's true or not. The delusion that once seemed like madness slowly begins to align with reality. The myth, the belief, becomes destiny. This transformation occurs when others begin to believe the myth as well. It's no longer just the delusional individual who acts with conviction. The world starts to reflect that belief. When Napoleon crowned himself, it wasn't just a statement of power. It was a declaration that the world would conform to his reality. And it did. Over time, those who follow the delusional leader stop questioning and start adjusting. They align their actions with the narrative the leader has created. And that's when the delusion stops being a myth and becomes truth. In the end, the delusional individual doesn't just conquer the world, they shape it. They redefine reality according to their own vision. And others, once skeptical, now view that reality is undeniable. That's the power of delusion. It doesn't just create momentum, it creates a new world, one where the impossible becomes inevitable. With all the power that delusion can bring, there is, of course, a price. It's not without risk. Delusional belief can ruin you if it's not tempered with caution. When your belief is not grounded in reality, failure becomes a very real possibility. But the risk, the danger, is what makes it so potent. Machiavelli understood this. He knew that a prince, or a leader, must be willing to embrace the dangers of delusion in order to reap the rewards. Playing it safe, being realistic, will only get you so far. It's the delusional who take the boldest risks, who redefine the rules of the game. While some may call it arrogance, others call it the willingness to challenge the established order. To the delusional individual, failure doesn't exist in the traditional sense. It is simply a stepping stone, a temporary setback in the journey toward the inevitable. When you believe so firmly in your own myth, failure becomes nothing more than a brief detour. But that same belief that can drive you to greatness can also cause your downfall. There's always the possibility that the world will reject your delusion, that your myth will fail to take hold. The challenge lies in knowing that despite the risks, embracing your delusion is the only way to move beyond mediocrity. Caution has its place, but in the world of power, playing it safe is a recipe for obscurity. The most successful men throughout history didn't hesitate to take risks. They didn't wait for the world to give them permission. Instead, they seized power by creating their own narrative, one where they were destined for greatness, regardless of how impossible that seemed. The real danger in life isn't failure, it's blending in. The world doesn't remember the cautious, the ones who waited for validation, who never challenged the status quo. These people are forgotten. They go through life being efficient but invisible, respected but never feared. They never dominate. Machiavelli would argue that the true danger is to be so cautious that you never make a significant move. The world rewards those who dare to break from the norm, those who disregard the warnings and risks in pursuit of something greater than themselves. To be cautious is to exist in the background, to be overlooked, to be dispensable. What's the cost of playing it safe? A lifetime of mediocrity, a life where you never truly achieve greatness because you never dared to reach for it. In the game of power, it's better to fail spectacularly than to never take a shot at all. Machiavelli understood that the greatest fear of any ruler or any person in power isn't failure, it's obscurity. A ruler may fall from grace, may lose their empire, but a life spent in the shadows, never truly seen, is the ultimate failure. Delusion allows you to rise above this fear. When you believe in your own greatness, you create your own narrative. This narrative is what drives you forward, regardless of how the world sees you. When you live with the conviction that you are destined for greatness, your actions become self-fulfilling prophecies. You no longer wait for the world to choose you. You choose yourself. Take the example of Napoleon. His ambition was not just to rule France, it was to rule the world. And he did so by crafting a myth around himself. He wasn't just a general, he was the embodiment of destiny. His myth was so powerful that even after his fall, his legend endured. Obscurity isn't just about being forgotten, it's about being unnoticed, unremarkable, blending into the background. The delusional leader, however, does everything in their power to stand out, to force the world to notice them. They understand that only by making a bold statement, through action, through belief, through myth can they ever achieve immortality. The power of delusion lies not only in believing your own myth, but in creating it. You are the author of your own story, and you must write it boldly, without hesitation. Legends aren't born from humility. They're born from self-assurance, from the belief that you are something greater than what you are in the moment. To create a myth, you must embody it fully. Every word, every action, every silence must reflect the story you want others to believe. It's not enough to talk about greatness, you must live as though it's already yours. Your victories must be framed as part of a larger narrative. When you achieve something, no matter how small, it must be presented as a step toward your inevitable rise. Napoleon didn't just win battles, he crafted a myth around his victories, turning each one into a legend. Even in moments of defeat, he framed his actions as part of a larger plan. The story was never about the present, it was always about the future, about the legend that was unfolding. Creating a myth isn't just about speaking boldly. It's about living with such confidence that others begin to see the world through the lens you've created. They start to view you not as an individual, but as a force of nature, something inevitable. The myth becomes your reality, and your reality becomes the world's. Once you've started to create your myth, the next step is to ensure that it lives on without you. The most powerful myths don't depend on the person who created them. They spread on their own, whispered in rooms, passed from person to person, until the legend grows beyond its creator. To truly cement your myth, you must let others carry the story for you. It must become viral, passed around like prophecy. The more people who believe in your story, the more powerful it becomes. Every time someone repeats your story, it gains more weight. Machiavelli understood this. He knew that to stay in power, a leader must not only build a myth, they must protect it at all costs. Doubt, whether external or internal, is the enemy of the myth. It must be silenced. Every weakness, every moment of vulnerability, must be hidden. Once the myth begins to crack, it's hard to hold on to. But as long as the myth survives, so does the leader. People will follow not because they believe in you, but because they believe in the myth you've created. And that myth, once solidified, becomes a force of its own. It influences how others behave, how they perceive the world, and how they see you. It transcends the individual and becomes something much larger. The final step in the journey of delusion is when the myth becomes reality. The delusional belief, once considered madness, transforms into something undeniable. When others start to believe in your legend as strongly as you do, the world begins to bend around you. At this point, it's no longer about convincing others, it's about reinforcing the belief that has already taken root. Your presence becomes magnetic. People stop questioning whether you're worthy of power, they start questioning whether they can afford not to follow you. The delusional leader has now become the inevitable leader. Their belief, once seen as absurd, has become a force that cannot be ignored. They've transcended the need for proof, the need for validation. They don't need to be right, they need to be certain. And when they speak, they don't just declare their ambition, they declare their destiny. The world no longer controls their fate, they do. In the end, what was once delusion has become truth. What was once myth has become history. And those who laughed at the delusional man now kneel before him. Not because he was lucky, but because his belief was unshakable. The myth has been completed, and now, the delusional leader stands alone at the top, having bent reality to their will. What started as delusion has become destiny. The world is theirs not because they waited for it to happen, but because they made it happen.